Metas are always evolving in an FPS, especially one where the developer changes the fundamental weapon balance of the game no less than 5 times, and that's only counting post-launch, not pre-launch changes. Unsurprisingly thus, Update 6.2 brought with it a whole new weapon balance and associated meta, which we've all been experimenting with over the past week. Now, while first impressions are not to be discounted, I personally quite like to base my recommendations on a little more substantial data, and thanks to the folks over at sim.gg, as well as KHT and Nocturne Saga on Reddit, we now have a more objective, stat-driven view of what the 6.2 changes mean for weapon performance and weapon balance in Battlefield 5. Yes, it's an improvement over 5.22, but really only in some parts, and there is still much that could be a lot better. Thus, today I want to cover the go-to weapons and weapon classes for different engagement distances, as well as what weapons to avoid, given that the changes in 6.2 are by no means a full revert, and sadly don't leave weapon balance as strong as it was previous to all these unwanted changes. A lot of the data and graphs in this video are going to be coming straight from KHT's Reddit post, so absolutely go and check that out. If you're interested, link of course will be down below in the description. So, starting things off, we have close quarters. Here, the high rate of fire SMGs such as the Suomi, Thompson, ZK383 with Light Bolt and even the Nambu Type 2A continue to reign supreme, as they really always have. Now, sub 20 meters, you should see performance with these weapons broadly similar, if not basically identical, to what we had in 5.0. It's really after 20 meters where things get a little bit more difficult, and these SMGs will be significantly weaker than they previously were from 20 meters onwards. And that's because, of course, of their new 6 bullet to kill that hits at 20 instead of 30 meter, which in combination with the return of substantial recoil leaves them largely ineffective beyond that 20 meter threshold. Now, to address the whole Type 2A OP claims, well, statistically speaking, that's not really true. Firstly, you need to consider that the Type 2A has a worse damage model than the Suomi, Thompson or ZK383, and in addition, has significantly more horizontal recoil. What this all means? Well, if you factor in that horizontal recoil but completely ignore vertical recoil, assuming thus perfect player control and the ideal but still realistically attainable situation for this weapon, then as the data provided by KHT proves, the two weapons, that is the Suomi and the Type 2A, are basically neck and neck identical, with the Suomi even performing slightly better after 5 meters. The real differentiating factor here between the close quarter choices amongst the SMGs are far more minimal. The Suomi is probably the best just in terms of raw damage output, the Type 2A has some of the fastest reloads and thus the lowest downtime, and the Thompson is a little bit of a mixture of the two. But the SMGs aren't your only option for close quarter combat that are of note. Firstly, these shotguns, by all accounts, have pretty much entirely returned to their 5.0 performance, and thus are pretty lethal once again, especially if you're one of those people that likes to hide in bushes with them. And if you move a little bit outside the exclusive sub 20 meter close quarter performance of weapons, then some of the assault rifles actually become quite relevant as well, most notably the M2 carbine and of course the M1907SF. Given that the ARs require an extra bullet to kill beyond 30 meters and are largely confined to a 20 to 30 meter ideal engagement distance, you want something with quite a bit of close quarter punch, and it's the likes of the M2 and the M1907 that really deliver that. Bursting is going to net you pretty good performance on both of these beyond 30 meters, but as we'll cover in just a bit, really after 30 meters, automatic weapons are completely outclassed by a number of other primary options. And yes, before somebody asks in the comments, the M2 and M1907SF will pretty much beat out or match the STG-44 at any range at which, well, assault rifles are relevant. So anyone saying the STG is still completely broken and overpowered, much like with the Nambu Type 2A, probably hasn't looked at any of the numbers more recently. But leaving behind close quarters and close medium range engagements, things get a little bit more simple. Semi-automatic rifles is the name of the game. Depending on how aggressive or how long range you want to go, a different weapon, but within that category, is likely your best bet. Now, for anybody paying a little bit of attention to what's going on with the weapon balance changes, this probably doesn't come as a big surprise. The semi-autos are only weaker in comparison to the previous 5.0 model at distances beyond 100 meters, and thus for all intents and purposes actually are fully reverted. Back in the days of 5.0, they were already extraordinarily strong, but now with the competition weakened, they're even better. To run you through a few, the Gewehr 1.5 is probably the most aggressive option out there, outdamaging most automatics from 10 meters onwards, and I'm talking about the likes of these STG or FG42, and really its dominance continues from there all the way to about 100 meters. If you're looking for something slightly more medium range focused but still aggressive, the Turner SMLE, MAS 44 or M1 Grand are great options, and if you want to go even further in terms of your engagement distances for a more medium long range build, then you've got the likes of the Gewehr 43, AGM 42 or M1 Grand with heavy load specialization as ideal choices. The reason for this will be known to most of you out there, but not all. Semi-autos in Battlefield 5 simply don't have any horizontal recoil. So with a little bit of vertical recoil control and good aim, you're basically damn close to perfectly accurate with them and have nothing to stop you from hitting your shots at any range really you want to. But let's say you're tired of playing with these semi-autos, there still is a number of other good options out there that situationally will even be able to outclass these semi-autos. They just usually, in this current weapon balance and meta, sadly aren't amongst the automatic weapons in the game. Specifically for the medic, we have the bolt-action carbine, still unchanged, and thus, especially in the case of the M28 and of course the extremely strong jungle carbine, offer pretty damn competitive performance, especially when going for those one-shot headshot kills, so it requires a little bit of accuracy. And on the recon side, of course, we have the SLRs. You would have seen plentiful people running around with the likes of the ZH-29, for example, and there's a good reason for that. Entirely reverted back to their 5.0 performance, when it comes to medium to long range targets, they simply dominate. The likes of the ZH-29 or Selbstlader 1906 will even whack a Gewehr 1.5 from 30 meters onwards and a Turner SMLE from 50 meters onwards. The likes of the Gewehr 43 or M1 Grand with heavy load fare a little bit better and can keep up until 100 meters, but at that point the likes of the ZH-29 will simply outclass them, and long before 100 meters they're already competitive. Sure, these weapons aren't necessarily easy to use and they require a bit of accurate shooting, but nothing that a bit of practice can't achieve. Also, the autoloading 8, especially with the trigger job specialization to bring its fire rate up to 225, is pretty damn deadly at medium range. Just of course, in my opinion, a little bit too finicky to use in a number of situations given its small magazine and lengthy reload process you have to go through sadly with this weapon. But okay, the dominant weapon class right now are shotguns and high RPM SMGs for sub 20 meter combat. High RPM ARs are decent between 0 and 30 meters, medium range and long range are entirely dominated by semi-autos, SLRs and bolt action carbines. But what about the rest of the ARs, LMGs and slower firing SMGs? Basically, most of the fully automatic weapons. Well, really, with the current weapon balance and the way DICE has decided to not fully revert the 5.2 and 5.22 changes, they aren't really, strictly speaking, competitive choices. The slow RPM SMGs, the likes of the ZK3A3 and MP34 without of course the light bolt specialization, or the EMP, MP40 and Sten, have been majorly hurt by the extra 1 bullet to kill from 20 meters onwards, and that's where in 5.0, thanks to their lower recoil and thus better accuracy, they were able to outdamage the faster firing SMGs such as the Thompson and Swarmy. While they can absolutely still do that sometimes, they get absolutely owned by the ARs between 20 and 30 meters and the semi-autos from then on out. The combination of 5.0 recoil but no 5.0 damage model actually means that beyond 30 meters, these weapons have higher time to kills in reality, factoring in the horizontal recoil in addition to fire rate and damage model, than they did in 5.22 and 6.0. Meaning they perform worse because of the return to proper recoil without the return to a proper damage model. Similarly with the ARs and LMGs, previously competitive to the semi-autos out to their 5 to 6 bullet to kill increase, which was at 30 meters, they are now only capable of staying competitive to 30 meters, where they hit that 6 bullet to kill, severely limiting their usage case of course against the close quarter SMGs, which are good until 20 meters, and well, the semi-automatics, which are really beating them hands down from 30 meters onwards. This leaves, of course, the close quarter ARs as the only really viable competitive picks, as the more medium range focused guns such as the STG simply lose every time against the competition from other weapon classes. Accuracy focused, low RPM ARs, especially like the Riberol, are now, sadly, basically worthless. To round things off, some constructive suggestions, not from me, but from KHT, who has gone through all this data and is the author of the charts you've been seeing in this video. The dude knows a thing or two about weapon balance and has been analyzing it for Battlefield 5 all the way since the days of the alpha. So first things first, ideally we need an actual full revert back to the values of 5.0. That means recoil is good as it is now, but the bullet to kill increases at 20 meters instead of 30 meters for the SMGs, and in the case of the ARs, LMGs, MMGs at 30 meters instead of 50 meters need to go. They need to be reverted. Then on top of that, extend the 4 bullet to kill for automatic firing weapons from sub 10 meters to sub 15 meters. This is specifically to give a boost to the slower firing SMGs, which generally can still accurately hipfire at these ranges, unlike the Thompson or Swarmy, and that gives them an edge in close quarter situations where they otherwise have a DPS disadvantage. It also helps the lower RPM ARs and LMGs triumph more clearly over the semi-automatics in close quarters, which is a distinguishing factor they desperately need at this point given how dominant the semi-autos are becoming. Lastly then, instead of the 30 meter damage drop off to the 6 bullet to kill, as we had it in 5.0, KHT suggests extending that to 35 meters for the SMGs, so that the slow RPM SMGs have an additional 5 meters where they are of relevance against the otherwise more traditionally dominant medium range focused weapons such as the STG-44, Riberol, and well, basically all of the semi-automatics in the game. And that is basically all that is required to make Battlefield 5's gunplay more varied, more balanced, and more enjoyable than it ever has been really. I highly recommend you go over to KHT and Nocturne Saga's post on Reddit. They always do a fantastic job at explaining why certain weapons perform better than others and generally put a lot of effort into their analysis. As said before, the link will be down below in the description. But that pretty much wraps it up for the current game meta. Feel free to share your own opinion and experiences down below. If you enjoyed the video, a rating would be much appreciated. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.